There were four of us. A long weekend at the end of August when summer had already started to fade, the evenings cooler, the nights longer. Felix was the one with the idea. Let's really get away this time. And by that, he didn't mean a campsite with power outlets and neighbors watching soccer in their RVs. He meant isolation, a place where you hear nothing but the wind, the birds, and your own fire crackling. Alongside Felix were Tom, Jaina, and me. We'd all known each other since school, but you know how life goes. College, jobs, relationships, and suddenly, the only time you see each other is at birthdays. This weekend was supposed to bring back a little of the old times. Felix had read online that in a certain forest area near Brandenburg, people could technically camp in the wild without anyone caring. No official campsite, no marked trails, just forest. The perfect middle of nowhere, he'd called it. We packed our backpacks, 2 tents, sleeping bags, canned food, beer, a couple of old guitars. On Friday afternoon, we parked the car on an empty country road. From there, a dirt path led deeper into the trees, narrowing into a trail that disappeared into the forest. Within minutes, all signs of civilization were gone. No traffic noise, no distant hum of a city, just the crunch of our footsteps and the occasional bird call. After half an hour, we found a small clearing. Hardly bigger than a living room, but perfect. Flat ground surrounded by tall trees and enough open space for a campfire. We set up our tents, gathered wood, and as the sun went down, the fire flickered to life. We sat in a circle, roasting sausages on sticks, drinking beer, and telling stories. It felt like being teenagers again. Everything seemed simpler. We laughed about old school trips, embarrassing moments, people we hadn't seen in years. Jana giggled endlessly. Tom made his usual sarcastic remarks, and Felix kept going on about how great it felt to be away from everything. That first night passed harmlessly. Of course, it took some getting used to, sleeping in the middle of the woods, where every sound feels amplified, every crack, every rustle. At one point, Jana whispered, "Did you guys hear footsteps?" But Felix waved it off. "Animals," he said. "Maybe a fox." I had heard them too. Slow, deliberate steps. Not the quick scurrying of an animal, but I said nothing, because really, who could it have been, out here in the middle of nowhere? The next morning was peaceful. We had breakfast, packed a bit of food, and went hiking. There were no trails, no people, just dense trees, fallen trunks, and a small stream winding lazily through rocks. It felt like we were the only humans left in the world. When we got back that evening, the mood was light. We lit another fire. Jana strummed the guitar softly while Felix talked about how freeing it was to escape everyday life. Sometime past midnight, we crawled into our tents, and that's when it started. I was half asleep when I heard it. A crack, then footsteps. Slow, heavy, not like an animal crashing through the brush, more like someone walking, taking their time. I held my breath. Then I heard Jana's whisper from the other tent. "Did you guys hear that?" Felix sat up immediately, grabbed his flashlight, and unzipped the tent. The beam swept across the trees, the ground, the bushes, the trunks, nothing. No movement, no sound, just the whisper of wind through the branches. "Probably a deer," Felix muttered. But his voice didn't sound convinced. The next morning, we saw them, all around our tents, little figures carved crudely out of sticks, bound together with grass or twine, 12 of them, maybe 13, arranged in a perfect circle around our campsite. Some had tiny markings scratched into them, others had twisted bundles for heads. We just stood there, staring. No one laughed, no one made a joke. It was obvious. They hadn't been there yesterday. "This isn't funny," Jana finally said. "Who did this?" We all shook our heads. Felix tried to explain it away. Maybe traces left by other campers. Maybe someone had used the area for a ritual. But why weren't they there the night before? And why were they exactly arranged in a circle around our tents? We didn't talk much about it. We tried to go about the day as normal, but the atmosphere had changed. Every so often, one of us would glance toward the figures, standing silently in the sunlight like a warning. That night was worse. It started around midnight, the footsteps again, but this time, more than one. They moved around us faster, circling the tent. We heard branches snapping, leaves rustling, heavy breathing. Jana grabbed my arm. "Don't go out," she whispered. But Felix couldn't take it anymore. He unzipped the tent, pointed the flashlight outside, and stepped into the darkness. We followed, more from panic than courage. The beams of our flashlights darted between the trees, slicing through the dark. But there was no one, no people, no animals, just the carved figures, still standing there, looking even more menacing in the flickering light. Eventually exhausted, we crawled back into our sleeping bags. None of us really slept that night. In the morning, Tom was gone. His sleeping bag was empty, his shoes were missing, but his backpack was still there. We shouted his name, we searched everywhere, ran in different directions. An hour, two, nothing. And then, he reappeared, just like that. He came walking out of the trees, barefoot, his feet covered in cuts, his face pale. "Where the hell were you?" Jonna yelled. "We've been looking for you everywhere." Tom blinked, confused. "What do you mean? I just stepped out for a bit, needed some air." "A bit?" Felix snapped. "You've been gone for hours." Tom shook his head. "No, maybe 5 minutes." We stared at him. He looked genuinely puzzled, but also exhausted, hollow-eyed, like he hadn't slept at all. Back at the clearing, we noticed something else. The wooden figures, all gone. Every single one. Only the disturbed earth remained, as if someone had yanked them out in a hurry. That was it for us. We packed everything, faster than we ever had, and left. No one said much on the drive home. Tom just stared out the window, rubbing his face with one hand. When we asked again if he really didn't know where he'd been, he just shrugged. Once, quietly, he muttered, "Some things you're better off not knowing." Since then, we've never gone camping in the middle of nowhere again. And sometimes, even in the city, when I hear footsteps outside at night, I think of that forest, of those wooden figures, and of Tom, who still hasn't told us what really happened to him out there. It had never been the plan to end up there. It was supposed to be a harmless weekend, a bit of hiking, some fresh air, enjoying nature. 2 nights in a tent, away from the city. Nothing big, nothing dangerous. It was just us, Ben, Caro, and me. 3 friends who'd known each other for years, but hardly ever did anything together anymore. Each of us trapped in our own routines, Ben in his job, Caro in her studies, and me somewhere in between. This weekend was supposed to be a small return, back to that feeling of freedom we used to chase when we were younger. Ben had chosen the area. On the map, it looked like an endless stretch of forest, barely any roads, no towns, no official hiking trails. The perfect middle of nowhere, he'd said. We laughed back then. It sounded like an adventure. The first few hours were perfect. We hiked through woods so dense that hardly any sunlight reached the ground. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp moss. We saw deer, heard woodpeckers, and at one point a family of wild boars crossed our path. It felt like we were the only people for miles. But everything changed on the second day. By morning, gray clouds hung low above us. The wind picked up, and the air grew heavy. We decided to pick up the pace, hoping to find a place to set up camp before the weather turned. But before we could even think about pitching the tent, the rain began. First a drizzle, then a shower, then a downpour. The kind that turns the ground to mud and the air to mist. Our clothes clung to our bodies, our backpacks grew heavier with every step, and each movement became twice as hard. When thunder rolled through the forest, we knew it was useless to try setting up the tent. We needed shelter, and then we saw it, the cabin, half hidden among tall fir trees, a gray, crooked wooden structure. The roof sagged in several places, the windows were clouded with grime, and the door hung loose on its hinges. But it was standing, and most importantly, it was dry. We stopped in our tracks. "Do you think anyone lives here?" Caro asked, her voice small, like she didn't really want an answer. "If they do, they haven't been here in a long time," Ben muttered. He forced a smile. "Come on, the place is practically falling apart, but it's better than the rain." So we went inside. It was dark, damp. The smell hit us immediately. Rot and mildew mixed with something else, something old, rancid. But it was dry. A table stood in the center, surrounded by 3 wobbly chairs. In the corner, a metal frame, maybe once a bed. Cobwebs everywhere. Dust, and on the walls, scratch marks. Deep grooves in the wood, some horizontal, some vertical. Right next to the door, beside the windows. As if someone or something had clawed at the walls from the inside. "What is that?" Caro whispered. "Maybe animals?" I said, not believing it myself. Ben stepped closer, running his fingers over the marks. If it was animals, they were either very big or very desperate. We didn't speak for a while. On the table sat an old mug, half filled with a hardened brown crust, coffee long since dried up. Whoever had been here last had left it behind, as if they'd just stepped out, planning to return later. In the corner, Caro found a pile of damp, wrinkled papers. She picked one up and froze. Children's drawings, stick figures, roughly scribbled in black marker, but none of them had faces. Not a single one. "This isn't funny," she muttered, setting them back down. We were soaked, exhausted, shivering. The rain hammered relentlessly against the roof. We had no choice but to stay. We sat on the floor, eating a few dry granola bars from our packs. The rain pounded on the walls, and after a while I realized something. It was too quiet. No birds. No rustling leaves. No sound but the rain. When it grew dark, Ben lit a candle from his bag. The flickering light danced across the walls, making the scratch marks seem to move, twisting, crawling. We barely talked. Each of us lost in our own thoughts. My eyes kept drifting to the drawings, those faceless figures. It felt like they were watching us, even without eyes. Eventually, we lay down to rest. I pulled my sleeping bag tight and tried to think of the rain as something calming. But before long, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy. Outside in the mud. Someone was walking around the cabin. Not the erratic movements of an animal. Steady. Measured. I held my breath. Then, scratching. At first faint, then clearer. Right against the wall, next to my head. A dragging sound, like something running its nails along the wood. "Do you hear that?" Caro whispered from the dark. "Yeah," Ben murmured. "Stay quiet." The scratching moved, from the door to beneath the window. Smack. We sat there, frozen, listening. And then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound itself. None of us slept that night. When morning finally came, we stepped outside. The rain had eased, and there, in the mud right outside the cabin, we saw them. Footprints, fresh, deep, circling the cabin. Again and again. They weren't shoes, they weren't animal tracks. They were bare feet. We packed up immediately. No one said a word. We just wanted to leave. But the way back stretched endlessly. No matter how far we walked, it felt like we were moving in circles. The forest all looked the same, each tree like a copy of the last. Our map was useless. Every trail we followed ended abruptly, in marsh or right where we'd started. The sun rose, fell again, and still we walked. And with every step I felt more certain the forest didn't want us to leave. Hours later, we finally stumbled upon a wider clearing. An old forest road that led us back to the main road. When we reached the car, no one was relieved. We drove in silence the entire way home. Much later, Ben said we should go back, find the cabin, make sure we hadn't imagined it all. But when we tried, we couldn't find the trail again. Not once. It's as if it never existed. And sometimes when I can't sleep at night, when I hear footsteps outside, just on the sidewalk, just neighbors, I think about that cabin, about the scratch marks, about the faceless figures, and about whatever was out there walking through the rain, over and over, around and around. And sometimes I wonder, is it still walking there today? It was one of those nights when the darkness feels so thick it swallows everything around you. No moon, no stars, just the deep, endless black between the trees. I was behind the wheel. Next to me in the passenger seat sat Sina, my girlfriend since college, staring nervously at her phone. No signal, it blinked. In the back seat, Marco, our friend, leaned against the door, eyes closed as if asleep. But I knew he wasn't. No one could really sleep with that empty road humming beneath us. We were lost. What was supposed to be a quick drive home after a day trip had turned into an endless loop through unfamiliar terrain. The road was narrow, lined with fields that looked like black holes in the night and patches of forest that pressed in on either side, thick, silent, suffocating. No lights, no towns, no sign of life, just asphalt, rolling endlessly into the dark. "How much farther?" Sina asked for the third time, her voice small and unsteady. "We should hit a main road soon," I said, trying to sound calm, though my heartbeat was loud enough to drown my own words. "Soon," she murmured, eyes flicking back to her phone. Still no signal. Marco stirred in the back seat. "Why are we even on this road?" he muttered. "There's nothing out here." "Because we took a wrong turn," I said, keeping both hands tight on the wheel. The headlights illuminated only a few meters ahead. beyond that, absolute blackness. We fell silent again. Only the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thud of tires against the road. No landmarks, no signs, no streetlights, just a wall of darkness closing in around us. And then I saw her. Out of nowhere, a figure appeared at the side of the road. A woman, small, thin, drenched. Her jacket clung to her body, her hair hung in wet strands over her face. She stood perfectly still, arms pressed tightly to her sides. Her gaze was fixed, blank, unblinking. "Oh my God," Sina whispered. "She's freezing." Marco straightened up. "Who is that? What's she doing out here?" I swallowed. "Maybe car trouble?" I slowed the car and pulled over. The woman took a small step forward into the beam of the headlights. She raised a hand, hesitantly, almost pleadingly. "Are you all right?" I asked. "Do you need help?" She lifted her head. Her skin was pale, almost gray, her eyes wide and glassy. "My car, engine broke. I have to keep going. Can you take me?" Her voice was fragile, barely more than a breath. Sina turned to me. "We can't just leave her here." Marco shifted uneasily. "Here? In the middle of nowhere? We don't even know who she is. And what if she really needs help?" Sina shot back. I hesitated for a few seconds, then I nodded. "All right, get in." The woman opened the rear door and climbed in next to Marco. Her clothes dripped softly onto the seat. She carried nothing. No bag, no phone, nothing. We started driving again. At first, no one spoke. Only the engine, the tires, and the rain-soaked road beneath us. The woman sat rigid, staring out the window. Marco pressed himself against the far door, trying to make space between them without making it obvious. After a while, Sina asked carefully, "Where exactly do you need to go?" The woman replied without looking away from the window. "To my brother's." "And where does he live?" A pause. Then in a whisper barely audible, "Close by." Marco snorted. "Close by? There's nothing close by, just fields and woods." No reaction. She kept staring out. Minutes passed. The silence grew heavier. I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Every so often I noticed her glancing toward us, quick, jerky movements. Her fingers kept twisting the wet fabric of her jacket, clutching and pulling at it like she was trying to calm herself. Then she spoke, suddenly, soft but sharp enough to cut through the quiet. "Do you drive this road often?" I hesitated. "No, first time." She nodded slowly. For a brief moment, a strange smile flickered across her lips, then vanished. The road stretched on endlessly, the landscape repeating itself. The same clusters of trees, the same empty fields that swallowed the light. And then I noticed something. Her feet, bare, covered in mud and small cuts. No shoes, no socks. A chill ran through me, though the car was warm. I was about to say something when the woman suddenly leaned forward. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Stop the car, now." I hit the brakes. The tires screeched against the asphalt. We came to a halt, surrounded by nothing but darkness. The woman opened the door, stepped out, and ran, barefoot, straight into the trees. We stared after her. For a few seconds, none of us spoke. Then she was gone. No sound of footsteps, no rustling branches, just silence, absolute silence. Marco slammed the door shut. "Drive, please, just drive." And I did. We didn't say another word for the rest of the night. None of us even looked toward the back seat. When we finally got cell reception again, we stopped at a gas station. We got out, breathed the cold air, but no one said a word about the woman. We just looked at each other, and in our eyes was the same quiet horror. To this day, I don't know who she was, where she came from, or where she went. But sometimes, when I'm driving down a lonely country road at night, I think about her bare feet in the mud, her blank, staring face, and I wonder if she's still out there somewhere, running through the darkness.